Welcome back to AP 101, Apostolic Training Bootcamp, Unit 2, Leadership, brought to you by apostolicfaithmission.org. Continuing on leadership style and our false shepherds. This is part 4. We're going to continue to look at discipleship or shepherding movement. This is the second installment. The two questions we looked at during our last session are here. We're just going to review those real quick. What are the signs of abusive shepherds fashioned after the shepherding movement? And number 2, list the 2 results of controlling relationships. What we're going to focus on most are questions 3 through 5 during this presentation. How can you know if a one-on-one discipleship has turned abusive? And 4, how can I abstain from participating in spiritual abuse? And number 5, how can I report it in AFM? That is, if you're noticing it, which you hopefully won't, since we teach directly on it here in within our midst. But if you do, at least you know we have a variety, or not a variety, but a few simple options for you to take in terms of reporting it, so that we can make sure that we deal with it if it does occur. Okay, to review number 1, what are the signs? Number 1 from the previous lesson. What are the signs of abusive shepherds fashioned after the shepherding movement? The answer is that abusive shepherds abuse their authority by lording it over, allowing themselves to be deified, taking church disciplines for extra, non, or unbiblical reasons, and they're also insecure and afraid of losing their absolute authority that they misuse in personal dealings. Absolute power corrupts absolutely, is the saying. Number 2, list 2 results of controlling relationships. Okay, the dominated feel rejection and fear, and they lose confidence and identity. All right, now we're going to move on to the new material in our presentation after reviewing that. And we're going to be looking at a little subsection here is your disciple or disciples of Christ or of men? Question 1, how can you know if one-on-one discipling has turned abusive? Well, let's look at your discipler. Now, your discipler is I guess the phraseology I borrowed from some groups that I've, should I say infiltrated? Well, wasn't that intentional? Um, but you know, you can be a place and you know you're there to look for fellowship, and then also you're not buying into some of what's going on. So the term I've heard used is your discipler, on at least one almost well, one recent occasion when I was a first-time visitor actually, and I walked in on that, which I thought that was very strange that they were doing on a Sunday, but they were suggesting that you should be. They were actually requiring that you be accountable to another person in the group, and they, of course, had handpicked those people that you would be. And that's kind of spooky. But to be accountable to another person sounds fine, depending on what you mean by being accountable. And so the definition of accountability in the shepherding movement typically goes beyond granting the person the right to ask you personal religious questions, expressing concern for your spiritual well-being. That would be something that a brother or sister in Christ would do, and you'd say, hey, no matter what happens, I would like you to always feel comfortable doing that, and that would be a fine thing to say to somebody, and a fine thing for them to follow up on, until any such point as you tell them that that's no longer the deal. Now, There may be other agreements that you might make along those same lines. But when accountability means that this discipler is your spiritual boss and they lord it over you, that's a different story because uh, we see here in Matthew 20 and verse 24, and hearing this, the 10 became indignant with the two brothers. But Jesus called them to himself and said, You know that the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their great men exercise authority over them. It is not this way among you, but whoever wishes to be great among you shall be your servant, and whoever wishes to be to be first among you shall be your slave, just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life a ransom for many. And a lot of times, and you may see nepotism in a variety of non-denominational settings because there is no prohibition of it. Nepotism, that is, for those who don't know, people promoting their relatives within a religious organization, is in this case. And we saw that in the Bible as well, here in Matthew 20:20. And the reason I put it here is because of Jesus' response to the mother's request. There he says, or then there I should say in Matthew 20:20, the mother of the sons of Zebedee came to Jesus with her sons bowing down and making a request of him. And he said to her, What do you wish? She said to him, Command that in your kingdom these two sons of mine sit, one on your right and one on your left. But Jesus answered, You do not know what you're asking. Are you able to drink the cup that I am about to drink? They said to him, We are able. He said to them, My cup you shall drink, but to sit on my right and my left, this is not mine to give, but it is for those for whom it has been prepared by my Father. So I kind of chuckled in the middle of reading that because they signed up, I think, sort of hoping that by signing up they were going to get the carrot at the end of the stick, but then they didn't. They found out that it wasn't up to Jesus anyway. So, but covet position or power, and that's of the political kind. When they say kingdom here, we're usually thinking of the spiritual kingdom. But at that time, they were thinking more in terms of an actual political kingdom that they thought Jesus was going to lead them into as either their troops or his troops or what have you. So, and we still see that in churches today, and that's a lot of the motivation that people have for, as we said last week, volunteering or giving of their time or their money is so that they can get sort of gain in return for those donations of time or money. So they're actually giving to get. Now, this nepotism issue, here's another way of getting a return. In this case, it's the leaders getting a return by having jobs to provide for their family through these religious, I guess, organizations that they're, I suppose, in charge of, and they make it a family affair. Now, uh, families are there are families issues when it comes to groups that control, and I think of a continuum between, well, from a safe religious group or all the way to a super dangerous cult. Um, Somewhere in between those two, there's a cult watch, or there's cult like, or groups with certain characteristics. Um, but we're not going to get into that in this presentation because that can get really complex. One thing we're going to note, though, about religious groups that control, or cults anyway, is that cults often control families, and that families often control cults. So it's just, I don't know why it works that way. It could be because because the families that run the cults want to keep the money in the family, and cults typically have two main activities. One being increasing funds, and two being increasing members. And yeah, of course. Well, I should say they have two main activities. Without reading into any motivations, the two main activities are fundraising and new member recruitment. So it might be simpler just to say that without new members, you have difficulty raising more funds. So um, cults typically don't provide uh, a value to the members or the people that they are attempting to recruit uh, per se, other than uh, the opportunity to volunteer to fundraise and recruit members. Y- Yeah, and by recruit, in some cases it could mean manipulate, trick, or other methods of coercion that are somehow or another within either legal or li enough within legal limits to not be prosecuted out of existence. So when we talk about cults controlling families, sometimes we see arranged marriages, and of course there's a continuum there too. It's more of a polemic than a dichotomy. There's churches, there's denominations where it can be of benefit for geographically isolated um, members to have a pastor that knows a pastor that knows a good match. And on one hand, and on another hand, there's I've heard of marriages that were horrible, and the people didn't even really want to marry each other, but they had the same pastor, and that pastor suggested that they should, and they did. So that's what I mean when I say arranged marriages, just to be clear. The children are really the victims more than anyone in cults or churches that control, because they didn't choose to be there to begin with, and they can't leave, and they're forced or coerced to participate more than anyone else because they're children, and it is legal for parents to coerce children into activities that they would prefer not to participate in. Okay, finishing question number one: how can you know if one-on-one discipleship has turned abusive? Uh, they act like your spiritual boss and they lord it over you. And this is a good indicator that any kind of church leader has turned abusive as well. Moving on now to number two, how can I abstain from participating in spiritual abuse? Well, fleeing the wolf is the title of this slide because there may not be a good way to leave or stop participating in spiritual abuse. Um, Spiritual abuse is a type of abuse, which means that you have reasons why you were in it to begin with. Those might take a while to untangle with a therapist. So there may not be a good way to leave, say goodbye, or end the relationship, period. But more than likely, there is not a way to do that that works for the abuser, or I should say that the abuser is willing to accept and say that the relationship is ending on good terms. So what they might do is lead you on an endless goose chase of continued performance-based acceptance, uh, so that in hopes that you could end the relationship on good terms. But more than likely, if it's truly an abusive relationship, um, there will not be a way for you to end it on good terms. Yeah, and abusive relationships aren't ones that you want to salvage anyway. So, um, the second one, the second reason why that you need to just cut off the relationship is because the abuser has used communication as a means to control you, either by domination or manipulation in the past, and will likely do the same again if you extend to them the privilege of communicating with you. So you know that you already have a weakness there, and this is the very tool that they've used before. So history repeats itself, and you're the same person you were. Uh, yes, you realize now that this, that, and the other, but um, they still have potentially many other ways uh, to control or dominate you or manipulate you through communication. So uh, the best thing to do is to flee the wolf. Now people think that's harsh, so you have to remember, as it says, number one, when we're talking about cutting off, by dominating or manipulating or being controlling in those ways. Sometimes people say being controlling and nobody knows what they mean. I'm not like that. I'm being specific here. By dominating or manipulating, you abdicate your right to be told by the person that you dominate or manipulate why someone is cutting you off relationally. In other words, if you want to be a bully and somebody doesn't call you back, that's probably why they didn't call you back. Hello? Don't do it. Don't be a bully. If you're getting bullied, don't call them back. Don't talk to them. That's called cutting off communication. Don't go to a church that they pastor or that they're in leadership of. By participating in an abusive environment via communication, you're enabling or empowering it. So sometimes there are environments that are inherently abusive because abusive people are allowed to be abusive in those environments and they are not kept in check by the leadership. Now, this is the same thing. This is not a safe environment. Don't go there. The leadership needs to have the spine to support people who report abuse. Um, if they don't, it's not a safe place because abusers are going to be able to practice their craft unchecked. Number three, abuse can only occur with victims. The Bible requires it to be starved out. In other words, if there's no victims, there's no abuse. So if there's a church that abuses, pretty soon if everybody did what the Bible said and left, it really wouldn't be a church anymore, would it? So that's the way that the Bible recommends to end it. Because, as it says in number 4, the church is by definition an abuse-free zone, and that is according to 1 Corinthians 5:11, which instructs us to cut off abusers. In fact, we see it in the Aramaic Bible in plain English. I have written this to you, not to mix. If there is one who is called a brother, and he is a fornicator, or a greedy man, or an idol worshiper, or an abuser, or a drunkard, or a robber, with whom you are not even to eat bread. Now, I picked that because it had the word abuser in there directly translated for you. This one's a little easier to read. It has another word in it that I like better than robber. Obviously, um, swindler includes the concept of robber, uh, but swindlers are a little more common in the church, I think, than people who actually come over and snag an item from your house at a house church meeting. So uh, let's look at the Net Bible for 1 Corinthians 5:11. But now I am writing you not to associate with anyone who calls himself a Christian who is sexually immoral or greedy or an idolater or verbally abusive or a drunkard or a swindler. Do not even eat with such a person. So now we know how to avoid the person exactly. We're not to, number one, associate with them, and then to be real clear, don't even eat with them. So here we see verbally abusive for abusive, so it's not just physically abusive. That helps looking at two different versions. I made a chart out of this because I want to talk about abuse and misuse. because what we're dealing with is people here, and there's two things that people do with people that make it to where you don't want to be around them anymore. And the one is abuse, that's on the left-hand side, and the other is misuse. The abuse, I think we'll talk about second. First, let's talk about misuse. Fornication is misusing others sexually without respect for God's boundaries or theirs or your families. Most families, um, especially Christian families, they want the boundary of sex within marriage to be kept, and so you want to respect not only the family but God. You want the other person's family, and so uh, there's all that, but really there's the idea that you're misusing somebody. Their body as a temple of the Holy Spirit was not intended to be used that way at that time. Um, they don't belong to you yet. In fact, they may never, because you're not married yet. So who knows what's going to happen? You can't presume like that. So uh, fornication is an example of misuse. Swindling is the same way. Swindlers, a lot of times, they're going to try to convince you, well, do something now because, trust me, later on this is going to happen. And that sounds a lot like somebody who's tempting you to fornicate, right? Oh, we'll be married later. Let's just go ahead and do this now. And again, it's a way of misusing others, and it's usually, or is a lot of times at least, based on false pretense. And there's a warning in James: do not say we will go to this city and do business here or there and make money. What is your life? You do not even know what will happen tomorrow. So, misusing each other. Um, those are two examples, and we have two more here. Idolatry is misusing non-God entities as God, and wrap your brain around that if you can. And then greed is misusing material items as your source. So let's talk about abuse. Um, Verbal abuse is, according to the freefromverbalabuse.com or .net, words, actions, reactions, and body language that attack, demean, minimize, berate, and belittle. That's verbal abuse. Now, the drunkard is mentioned here in 1 Corinthians 5:11 as well, and that word actually refers to all different types of substance abuse, especially of the recreational kind. There's another word that deals with pharmaceuticals or treating symptoms. So the substance abuse is used to dull the pain of other concomitant abuse types often. There's other reasons for substance abuse too, but you'll see that as a big reason because these different varieties of abuse that I have here, and there are others yet still, they tend to go hand in hand. They tend to go together. You tend to see them in a family system. Um, so the people that you'll meet at a church that spiritually abuses typically are going to have uh, these types of other types of abuse in their life and in their generations. They may either be verbally abusive or have been verbally abused in the past. The preacher may actually verbally abuse the congregation from the pulpit or in person. That may be demeaning or berate or belittle. The Let's look at spiritual abusers. Place themselves over God's people to control, coerce, or manipulate them for seemingly godly purposes, which are really their own. And then there's abuse not otherwise specified. So we have child, spouse, domestic, elder abuse. And these are just those that I mentioned that are typically concomitant with the others. And there we have the chicken or egg. Do people with abuse in their life and generations gravitate towards churches that abuse? Yes. Um, do people with abuse in their life and generations create churches that abuse? Yes. So, this issue of abuse, as you can tell, is pretty serious, and it's one that is to be removed from the church like a cancer. Uh, One of the ways to do that is by education. Some people just don't know themselves well enough, so therapy is very important. But let's just do a quick lesson here on this slide, at least to know this much. Abuse does not equal church or love. Okay, some people think it does. Well, I got to go to church to hear that. We got to let the preacher really tear into us to keep us straight, and that's that's how they think it should be. And as it says here, verbally abuse is demeaning, minimizing, berating, belittle. You're just a worm. And a lot of this Old Testament, it's not talking about your identity in Christ at all. It's talking about your identity in the devil or in the flesh. And you end up with a bigger devil than you have a God, and it's discouraging. Now, if you are participating in abuse in the name of a church or Christian fellowship, you're not fellowshipping or going to church at all. What you're doing is participating in religious or spiritual abuse. You still haven't gone to church that week. Now you need to go find a real church. If you want to continue to participate in abuse, that's your choice. But you also need to go to church that week if you want to be the type of Christian that goes to church. I know that's important to a lot of them. Okay, the second thing is abuse does not equal love. A lot of people who are raised in abusive environments feel love either around abuse or when they feel abused or when they're abused. I think that's very strange. Why is that? Well, for them, it's very, number one, it's familiar. Their parents abuse them, and the parents are their primary caregiver that they bonded at crucial ages in their development. So they associate the familiarity of abuse with love. Secondly, it's comfortable. They know the role. They know what role to play. Oh, it's my fault. I'm stupid. I can't do this. Well, they don't feel successful in life or in their own skin, but they feel successful in doing what I just demonstrated, in self-pity and um, self-deprecation, and a lot of the things that we deal with in Miracle Healing 101 and in the Miracle Healing Manual that actually make you sick in your mind, in your spirit, in your soul, and in your body. Number three, uh, abuse can feel nostalgic. So it reminds people of home. It has something to do with being comfortable, but there's more to it than that. It's part of what draws them back into it. They'll miss church or being in that abusive person's house. It reminds them of home. Number four, safe. Abuse makes them feel safe because there's usually, they know their role and they know what to do. It's almost like even though abusive relationships can appear to be boundaryless, uh, to people who are experienced at getting abused, I'm sorry, I know that's not funny. It just sounds like an oxymoron to because typically the relationships don't have clear boundaries. Although they can sometimes have clear boundaries that are horrible boundaries to have. At any rate, the people feel safe because they're not having to learn new skills in how to relate to one another and themselves and God properly and according to God's word. So it's safe. In other words, it's not change, it's their comfort zone. But I say all this to let people who haven't been abused to know that there are people like this, and part of the reason that they might be abusing you is they're actually trying to let you know that they love you. And I'm going to let that sit there for a minute. You're wondering why that person acts the way they do toward you. That may be the way that they know how to express love. It's because they've been abused, and the difference between a perpetrator and a victim um, is often thought of as polar opposite. The truth is, uh, people are usually both. They were victimized before, and now they're perpetrating some type of abuse on someone else. Okay, this slide has got some information on it. You can press pause. I don't know Lawrence Pyle, but this presentation, as helpful as it may be, I really feel is just an introduction into this type of thing. There are people that do this full time for a living, and this person's one of them. I hope he's still around and out there. I lifted this off the internet, so I've given you the web address that I did. And I know that coming out of this type of thing is difficult to find people with expertise in it. So uh, God bless you in that, and don't give up. And there are a lot of other people who are in your situation, and you can change, and you can find better relationships. Okay, question number 4. How can I abstain from participating in spiritual abuse? Well, the answer is get out, get away. You have to say why. You have to explain it. Just stop communicating. You really need to get that spirit of obligation or guilt or the feeling of needing to explain yourself or provide a reason why um, out, because part of that is coming from an abusive, typically family system background. When people accuse you, you feel like you have to give an answer. If you're not in court, you really don't. You can be secure in who you are, and the decisions that you make for yourself are things that you have to justify to yourself. Uh, when it comes to personal decisions like religion, you don't need to justify those to others. I mean, except for, your wife, uh, things like that. But in general, when you leave, people say why, and come back, and this is again, this can easily go into manipulation. So the short answer is flee. Yeah, we were, we were just discussing here. How did you know AFM was going to be a simple procedure? Because we don't like things to be complicated. How can I report it in AFM? Well, you have just a few options, not too many, because then that would be hard. But some people want to go first to the person. Um, and we want to say that's fine. Of course, you can do that. You don't have to, but you can if you want. We just want to put that out there. And here's a scripture for why people want to go first to the person. Uh, and we'll also give you scriptures of why you don't have to go first to the person in this case. So let's look at Matthew 18 first. If your brother sins against you, if your brother sins against you, go and tell him his fault between you and him alone. If he listens to you, you've gained your brother. But if he does not listen, take one or two others along with you, so that every charge may be established by the evidence of two or three witnesses. If he refuses to listen to them, tell it to the church. And if he refuses to listen even to the church, let him be to you as a Gentile and tax collector. Now, the reason that you don't have to necessarily go to him first in a case of abuse, and we've defined abuse hopefully clearly enough, is because abuse from a leadership position in our organization we're talking about now is public. Now, here's an example in 1 Corinthians 5, and I'm looking at the Amplified Bible, where Paul writes, "It is actually reported that there is sexual immorality among you, impurity of a sort that is condemned, and does not occur even among the heathen. For a man has his own father's wife, and you are proud and arrogant, and you ought rather to mourn, bow in sorrow and shame until the person who has done this shameful thing is removed from your fellowship and your midst." So Paul's introducing what we'd probably call in behavioral psychology, and I could be wrong, but it seems like a group contingency response cost intervention. So that's public, and uh, he did something, and he's getting a cost for that. It's administered by the whole group. They're gonna mourn and bow in sorrow and shame. Probably not have any feasts or parties as long as he's around. He's probably related to some of the people, so they're not going to have any parties that maybe are at the house, I'm guessing, when he's there, and they're not going to eat with him, as it we looked at the earlier scriptures, um, until he's removed from your fellowship, and he says, and your midst. So I don't know if he's probably being allowed to live there in his father's house. Uh, so it looks like he's probably going to get thrown out of his father's house. He's probably old enough to have his own place, uh, and needs to get out of the father's house for obvious reasons that are quite obvious in verse 5. Or should I spell those out? Yeah. So when the way that a sin is handled is to some degree determined by the context in which it occurred, and we don't need you to worry about that. Some of you that are teachers understood what I just said. Uh, we're going to keep it real simple. I have an escalation path for you here. Uh, if you think someone's being abused, or you feel like icky, or like somebody just tried to control you or put something on you, um, especially if it's something from like their own little thing and it doesn't have anything to do with what we're doing it that you agreed to up front, as part of our websites and curriculum and so forth, and uh, you can just escalate to any of our leadership and let them know that that happened or what it is, and we'll eventually end up hearing about it if it's a big enough issue, or if it continues, especially if it's a pattern. So it's how do you do that? It's always all our leaders, and all you're all getting trained right now. If somebody says, "Hey, can I talk to you for a minute?" By default, try to get them as alone as you can. Keep your wife with you, or other way around, or I'm sorry, or vice versa, or your husband or your wife, your spouse, I should say. Um, but yeah, when for is for the leaders, when someone comes to you and they're trying to report someone else's behavior, you want to try to keep that in confidence as much as possible. Um, Additionally, the person can go straight via email to abuse@apostolicfaithmission.org. So that at this point goes to me, but I'm hoping to have an accountant-looking guy with glasses that has this like really serious look on his face all the time. Eventually, check that, and so that he can make appointments, uh, or with people or handle things however he does. Um, I don't know if anybody got that joke, but if that way, if it's about me and I was the one that did the abusing, he can deal with it, because as you see at the apex of the pyramid, it's a different leader, no, other than me. So, uh, okay. Number 5, how can I report it in AFM? Well, you have two choices. As an AFM participant, as somebody who's registered for a course and you're taking it, and probably, well, let's say, for example, a home setting, and a person there. We'll do it both ways. The person there who's not a leader, a non-leader, you escalate to the leader of the group, and they'll take it from there. Um, or let's say that actually the leader of the group is being culty, or I guess we didn't define culty. Let's throw that out. Is abusive to you, or somebody else that doesn't report. We don't want to have too many duplicate reports. Um, what you can do is email. because obviously you may or may not want to talk to that leader about that leader. You may want to follow what it says in Matthew 18. Um, if you're like me and you have that kind of personality, uh, very few people have that kind of personality that is not at all afraid of conflict. Most people are probably going to want to just email abuse at apostolicfaithmission.org to report the leader uh, of the or the facilitator of the course that's meeting in the home or whatever type of group is whatever leader they feel like has been abusive to them. They can always use that email to report any kind of abuse that they see happening under our auspices.